The sky turns that, well, you know that bruised purple color? The air just goes completely unnervingly still.
Oh, yeah.
It's not a peaceful silence either. It's this heavy, oppressive silence. Like if you've ever lived in the hurricane belt, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The birds stop singing, the street dogs just kind of they disappear into alleys, and then you hear it,
The
the
hammers.
hammers, yeah. That specific rhythmic thud, thud, thud of plywood going up over the windows, it's basically the soundtrack of waiting.
It is entirely a ritual. It's
Yeah.
almost muscle memory for anyone living in the Caribbean or on the Gulf Coast.
Yeah.
You prepare, you endure the noise and the wind, and then inevitably the sun comes out and you start to rebuild.
And that is usually where the story ends for the rest of the world.
Right.
The news cameras pack up, the reporters go home, and that whole human interest story just fades away. But today, for this deep dive, we are doing something a bit different. We are sticking around for the aftermath. We're diving into a really compelling and honestly somewhat sobering article that was published by Jamaica Homes on February 25, 2026. It's titled Kingston, Jamaica, A Timeless Reflection on Recovery and Resilience.
Right. And what makes this piece so striking to me, what really stands out, isn't the descriptions of the wind speed or the rain totals. It's the approach. It treats recovery not as a humanitarian story, but as a math problem.
A math problem. I mean, it sounds pretty cold.
It sounds cold, yeah, but it's actually incredibly practical when you dig into it. It's a look at how recovery isn't just about, cleaning up debris from the streets. It's a highly complex equation. It involves economics, supply chain logistics, construction cycles, and crucially, human psychology.
Wow.
The central premise here is that we really need to understand why a storm in 2024 might actually be the thing that defines the entire economy of 2030.
See, that is a massive claim. We're talking about a 6-year ripple effect from one single weather event. So our mission today, what we really want to unpack for you, is the critical difference between building back, which is that catchy slogan we hear from every politician in a windbreaker,
Every single one.
and this new concept of building forward. Because according to our source material, there's a very, very expensive difference between those two things.
Precisely. And if we get it wrong, we literally pay for it for a decade.
Okay, so let's unpack this math. The article starts off by laying out the actual timeline of recovery. And I think for most of us, specifically those of us watching from a safe distance on our TVs, we assume recovery is linear.
Right.
Like the storm hits, the power goes out, the power eventually comes back on, the roof gets fixed, and we're all back to normal. Maybe, 3 months max?
That is definitely the optimistic view. But the source argues it's way longer than that, and vastly more layered. The article actually breaks it down into 5 distinct phases. And having this framework is crucial because if you don't know which phase you're in, you end up making the wrong financial decisions.
So walk us through these phases.
Okay, so phase 1 is immediate relief. This is the adrenaline phase. Search and rescue, clearing the main roads just so ambulances can get through. This phase is measured in days.
Okay.
Then you hit phase 2, which is temporary stabilization.
This would be the blue tarp phase, right?
Exactly. You're getting the power grid back online, getting the municipal water running again, patching up the worst holes. And this is measured in weeks.
Got it. Okay, so far, this tracks with what we generally see on the evening news.
Right. But then the cameras leave.
Yeah.
And you enter phase 3, which is structural repair. This is the really hard work, fixing the roofs for real, repairing washed out bridges, pouring new concrete. That part takes months.
Yeah.
But then, and here is where the article really shifts gears. You have phase 4, financial recalibration, and phase 5, long-term adaptation.
And those last two are measured.
Years.
Really? Why does financial recalibration take years?
Because the money doesn't just magically appear overnight. Insurance claims can drag on for 18 months or more. Government grants have to be proposed, approved, allocated, and finally dispersed. And think about the local businesses.
Yeah.
While they wait for that relief money, their debt accumulates. They have to take out high-interest loans just to stay open. Homeowners end up dipping into their retirement savings. So you spend literally years just trying to balance the books back to where they were the day before the storm even hit.
Which brings us to the kicker, kind of the core argument of this entire piece. Mathematics is indifferent to optimism.
I love that line so much. Mathematics is indifferent to optimism. It sounds harsh, like a very stern physics teacher, but it is fundamentally true. The article lays out a very specific scenario. If a major storm strikes in 2024, the recovery process, all those 5 phases we just talked about, stretches well into 2025.
Okay, so one storm equals 1 year of recovery. I mean, that seems somewhat manageable.
In a vacuum, yes. But we don't live in a vacuum. We live in a climate cycle that is demonstrably getting more active. So what happens if another storm hits in 2025?
Well, you're not starting from zero.
No, you're absolutely not. You are interrupting a cycle that isn't finished yet. You're getting hit again while you're still stuck in phase 3 structural repair.
Oh, wow.
So now, the recovery from the 2025 storm flows directly into 2026. And if 2026 delivers yet another weather system, that repair cycle stretches deep into the decade, you are essentially pushing normal all the way out to 2030.
It's kind of like a video game where you keep getting knocked down before your health bar has a chance to refill. You're just playing the whole rest of the game at 50% capacity.
That's a really great analogy.
Yeah.
And the source points to actual history to prove this isn't just academic speculation. It mentions the lingering memory of Hurricane Gilbert from back in 1988.
Oh, absolutely. That's a name that definitely still carries weight down there.
It does, largely because of the sheer scale of reconstruction it demanded.
Yeah.
Entire communities had to be completely reimagined. It took years to feel quote-unquote normal again. And then the source also points to the more recent Hurricane Melissa, which was a Category 5 storm.
Right.
The damage there was a bit different. Roofs lost, infrastructure severely strained. But the real impact was that it paused livelihoods and totally interrupted supply chains.
And that interruption is exactly what I want to dig into next, because the article talks about this compounding effect. It's one thing to just say recovery takes years, but what does that actually look like on the ground when you have these overlapping cycles? What happens when you hit that lost decade risk they talk about?
Well, this is where we get into the logistics bottleneck. When storms cluster together, you run into very specific, highly tangible problems. The first one is labor scarcity.
Right, because suddenly, literally everyone in town needs a roof fixed at the exact same time.
Correct. Imagine you need a carpenter. Well, so does your neighbor, and the school down the street, and the big hotel on the coast. Skilled tradespeople. Your carpenters, electricians, masons, they are finite resources. You can't just 3D print a master carpenter overnight.
No.
So basic supply and demand kicks in.
The price goes up.
The price skyrockets. And it's not just the labor side of things, it's materials too. Everyone is ordering lumber, zinc sheets, and concrete all at once. The local hardware stores sell out in a matter of hours. The importers struggle to get fresh stock because the ports themselves might be damaged or backlogged.
Yeah, that makes sense.
This causes what the source calls material surges. And the article makes a crucial point here. Contractors begin to price uncertainty into their work.
Structural inflation.
Yes, structural inflation. This is a vital concept to grasp. What begins as just a temporary price hike because of a sudden shortage eventually becomes a permanent cost pressure.
Right.
If a contractor knows prices for lumber are volatile, they're going to bid high to protect themselves from taking a loss. So building a house becomes fundamentally, permanently more expensive than it was before the storm.
And I have to imagine that changes how regular people behave, right? If I'm a homeowner and everything is suddenly 40% more expensive and I'm terrified another storm is coming next year, I have to make some pretty tough choices.
You do. You're forced to. And the source identifies this as a dangerous behavioral shift. When households face repeated stress and astronomical costs, they naturally prioritize immediate repairs. They patch the obvious holes. They fix the broken window. They do just enough to stay dry for the night.
They enter survival mode.
Exactly. Survival mode. But what gets cut from the budget? The upgrades. The structural strengthening. The article mentions specifically that things like installing better drainage or investing in slope stabilization, those projects get postponed indefinitely.
Because, I mean, you can't see drainage, but you can definitely see a gaping hole in your living room roof.
Precisely. The mindset becomes, I'll do the drainage next year when I have more money, but then next year brings another storm. So you end up fixing the roof again, but you leave the foundation completely vulnerable to the floodwaters. Vulnerability literally gets embedded into the housing stock because people are just trying to survive the current moment.
That is terrifyingly logical, honestly. It's a short-term survival mechanism that completely undermines you in the long run.
It does. And that brings us to the fascinating disconnect the article highlights, what they call the illusion of macro recovery.
Oh, this was such a great point in the piece. The stark difference between what the economists see and what the actual homeowners see on the ground.
Right. Picture an economist sitting in a high-rise office looking at a spreadsheet. They see GDP growth. Why? Because immediately after a disaster, billions of dollars are spent on construction and aid. They see insurance payouts hitting local bank accounts, so liquidity is up. They see tourism flows eventually resuming. And if those lines on the chart go up, they proudly declare recovery.
But the article has this absolutely fantastic quote of roof does not strengthen because reserves are stable.
Yes, and a hillside does not stabilize because inflation is eased. That is the ultimate reality check. Economic indicators can tell us if the system is functioning is money moving around, but they don't tell us if the physical structures are actually safe. You can
Wow.
have a booming, robust post-disaster economy where every single house in the neighborhood is still just one bad gust of wind away from total collapse.
So what does actual real-world real estate recovery look like then? If we just ignore the GDP for a second, what's the actual checklist we should be looking at?
The source gives us a very clear, grounded list.
Hmm.
First, homes must be structurally secure,
Oh.
not just patched up with temporary fixes. Second, drainage must function under stress, meaning it works when it's pouring rain for 3 days straight, not just when it's dry.
Makes sense.
Third, insurance must remain accessible.
That's a huge one. If insurers get spooked and pull out of the market because the risk is too high, the whole property market just collapses.
Exactly, you can't get a mortgage without insurance. Fourth, property valuations need to reflect resilience. So a strong, prepared house should actively be worth more on the market than a weak one. And finally, communities must actually feel stable.
That feeling of stability, I mean, that's hard to measure on a spreadsheet, but you definitely know it when you have it. It's the confidence to invest in remodeling your kitchen because you fundamentally believe it will still be standing there in 10 years.
You do. You feel it in the culture. And until those physical and financial conditions exist in reality, recovery is only ever partial, no matter what the GDP numbers say.
So, if we want to get to that genuine stability, we clearly have to change our approach. The article makes this sharp distinction between build back and build forward. Now, build back is catchy. We hear it in political speeches literally all the time. But what exactly is build forward?
Build back is inherently nostalgic. It's all about restoring what was lost. It looks backward to the way things were before the wind started blowing. Build forward, on the other hand, is about anticipation. It looks at the cold, hard data and assumes quite rationally that the next storm is already coming.
Anticipation, not reaction.
Yes. The article argues that when you live on an island highly familiar with hurricanes, anticipation isn't alarmism, it's just basic prudence. But here's the thing, and you might be a little disappointed by this, the solution isn't dramatic. It's not giant coastal seawalls or sci-fi domes over the capital city.
It's not. I mean, I was kind of hoping for domes.
Sadly, no domes. The source actually calls the solution boring.
Boring. I thought we were saving the future here.
We are, but we are saving it with technical details. True resilience isn't about grand ribbons being cut by mayors. It lives in the roof-to-wall connections designed for higher wind loads.
Like hurricane straps.
Exactly, hurricane straps. It lives in foundations being elevated just 6 inches higher to avoid repeated nuisance flooding. It lives in culverts that are intentionally sized for heavier rainfall patterns, maybe designing for a 50-year flood event instead of a 10-year one.
Yeah.
It lives in strict zoning decisions that bravely say, no, you cannot build a subdivision here. This is a natural drainage corridor.
Disciplined details. I think that's the phrase the author used.
That's it. Disciplined details. These details are completely unsexy. You can't take a good PR photo of a slightly larger concrete culvert. But these specific details determine the outcomes. The ultimate goal here is to move from normalizing recovery, which is that endless cycle of break, fix, break, to normalizing resilience.
Where each storm causes noticeably less displacement than the last one did.
Precisely. If we do this right, if we build forward, a storm in 2030 shouldn't do anywhere near the same damage as a storm in 2024. It should just be a disruption, not a generation-defining disaster.
Okay, but let's talk about the elephant in the room here. Money.
Always.
Who actually pays for these disciplined details? Because upgrading a foundation or retrofitting a roof isn't free. If I'm that stressed homeowner we talked about earlier, already struggling with structural inflation, how do I actually afford to build forward?
This is the absolute crucial part of the whole argument. The source introduces what it calls the financial architecture. It argues that long-term property stability rests on 3 pillars. And they all have to align perfectly. You can't just put all this weight on the shoulders of the individual homeowner.
So what are these 3 pillars?
Pillar number 1, construction quality. Building standards must be consistently and strictly enforced to reduce future damage claims. This falls squarely on the government and the local regulators. If you allow developers to build cheap and fast, you are practically guaranteeing future municipal costs. We have to completely stop incentivizing cheap, fast construction.
Okay, so strict enforced building codes. What's number 2?
Pillar 2, Insurance penetration. Coverage has to accurately reflect the real environmental risk, but it also has to remain financially accessible to normal people.
That seems like a tough
It is
balance.
a massive tightrope walk. If insurance gets too expensive, no one buys it. And then the state ends up paying for everything out of pocket when the storm hits. If it's too cheap, the private insurers just go bust. There needs to be a real public-private partnership there.
And the third pillar.
Lending discipline. This is where the retail banks come in. Banks desperately need to recognize resilient upgrades as value-preserving measures. They need to see that a house with better upgraded drainage is inherently worth more equity than one without it.
So the bank needs to care about that boring concrete culvert just as much as the homeowner does.
Exactly. Because think about it. If the house washes away in a mudslide, the homeowner's mortgage doesn't magically wash away with it, but the physical asset securing that loan is completely gone. When banks start actually rewarding resilience, maybe by offering better interest rates or higher valuations for fortified homes, then the whole market shifts. Suddenly, those boring upgrades become highly valuable financial assets.
Makes sense. If one of these three pillars weakens, the whole structural architecture just strains.
Correct. But when they all align, recovery becomes significantly faster and way less disruptive, because the flow of money actually creates the incentive to build right in the first place.
The article actually paints two very different pictures of the year 2030 based on this exact architecture. It's almost like reading a choose-your-own-adventure book.
It really is. The source explicitly asks us to take the long view. Let's imagine the next decade without any sentimentality. Scenario A. We get major storms in 2024, 2025, and 2026. We treat each one as a shocking surprise. We patch the roofs. We cope. We rely entirely on the quote-unquote resilience of spirit alone.
That's the struggle scenario.
Yes. Under Scenario A, by the time we hit 2030, the island is still trying to resolve all those compounded vulnerabilities from the mid-2020s. The housing stock is tired and battered, insurance is totally unaffordable, the wider economy is just stuck in that grueling stop-start cycle.
And scenario B.
Scenario B. We have the exact same storms, though their pattern is identical.
Okay.
But the rebuilding decisions made in the months between those storms are highly deliberate. We use the build-forward approach, we enforce the building codes, the banks actually value the upgrades. By 2030, the island stands on a demonstrably stronger housing foundation.
So the future direction doesn't actually depend on the weather, because the weather is the exact same in both of those scenarios.
That is the major key takeaway. The weather is just the variable we cannot control. The direction of the economy depends entirely on how the rebuilding decisions are made on the ground.
We are not afraid, but we must be deliberate. That's a really powerful sentiment from the source material. It really emphasizes that Jamaica isn't fragile. The human spirit there is incredibly resilient.
Yes, the source clearly mentions that these communities respond so quickly. Tradespeople mobilize, neighbors support one another, families take each other in. The local social capital is just off the charts. The resilience of spirit is already there. The real challenge is translating that into resilience and specification.
Resilience and specification, meaning literally putting that local spirit into the engineering blueprints.
Exactly. Treating neighborhood drainage as critical infrastructure, not just a landscaping afterthought. Viewing heavily reinforced roofing as essential, not some luxury premium add-on. Designing entire communities around natural water flow, not trying to build against it.
It's recognizing that climate volatility is structural. It's just a permanent feature of the neighborhood now, so our response to it must be structural too.
And when those proactive ideas become routine, when they just become the standard default for how things are done, storms shift from being these terrifying existential threats to just being manageable events.
That is a profound shift in mindset. Manageable events.
It's the difference between a disaster and a disruption. A disruption is annoying. You lose power for a day, you clean up some branches. A disaster is ruinous. It takes your home. We desperately want disruption.
So bringing this all home, what does this mean for you, for the listener driving to work right now, or maybe the homeowner looking up at their own roof, wondering about the next season?
Well, the source wraps up with a very grounding, almost philosophical thought about land and memory. Storms do not erase geography.
Right. A floodplain is still a floodplain, no matter how much you wish it wasn't.
Exactly. Coastal exposure remains coastal exposure. Okay. Rebuilding a home in the exact same configuration in the exact same spot without any new mitigation is really just preserving risk. The article doesn't demand that everyone packs up and moves inland. That's obviously not realistic for an island nation, but it absolutely demands honesty in planning.
Honesty in planning.
Clear, accurate flood mapping. Infrastructure first public investment. If a bad storm in 2024 leads to much smarter construction codes in 2025, that is actual progress. That is the true definition of
It's
success.
evolution versus endurance.
Yes, the island has proven time and again it can endure. We know that. The
Yeah.
history books are completely full of endurance. The next measure of success is whether that cultural endurance can become structural evolution. Can we learn to adapt faster than the climate itself can change?
Man, that is a lot to chew on. It really takes the whole concept of hurricane prep out of the hardware store aisle and turns it into a massive long-term economic strategy.
It does. And it leaves us with a really provocative question that the source poses at the end. Are we normalizing the act of basically just getting really, really good at cleaning up the mess? Or are we normalizing the state of being resilient, where there is just fundamentally less of a mess to clean up in the first place?
That's the choice right there. The answer to that question determines whether the next decade is one of continuous struggle or actual transformation. So, something for you to think about next time the sky turns purple.
And as the source reminds us, the next storm won't test our optimism. It will test our preparation.
And preparation is fully within our control.
Always is.
Thank you so much for breaking all this math down with us. This was a really fascinating look at the economics behind the weather.
My pleasure. It's an incredibly important conversation we all need to be having.
And thank you for listening to this deep dive. We'll catch you on the next one. Stay safe and stay resilient.